This is Professor Michael Chapman. I'm one of the most experienced IVF doctors in Australia. I believe that an important part that I can contribute is to educate patients in relation to fertility, infertility, and all that involves. These series of podcasts help to educate you. I hope they are helpful to you. If you wish to know more, however, I'm more than happy to have you contact me via email, which is profmchapman@gmail.com, or make an appointment to see me on 9138 4222. The background to endometrial receptivity testing is what we know from natural cycles. So when a woman has a nice 28-day cycle, ovulates on day 14, egg is fertilized by sperm in the fallopian tube. It doesn't actually happen in the uterus, it happens in the fallopian tube. The day or so later, it then grows within the fallopian tube for 5 days before it enters the uterus. In the meantime, what's happening in the uterus is that the lining of the womb is changing its character. In the first half of the menstrual cycle, that lining is thickening up due to estrogen. But when it's exposed to progesterone at the time of ovulation and beyond, it starts to change its character, growing glandular tissue, which secrete lots of goodies to make an embryo attach and an embryo to grow, and to start the process of interconnection between the embryo's bloodstream and the mum's bloodstream. So very complex collection of things happen in those 5 days. And that when an embryo arrives in the uterus on day 5, 6, 7, the lining of the womb has to be ready. It's like a garden ready for the flowers to be planted. The fertilizer, the state of the soil has to be at its peak to accept the implantation to occur. And what we know is that if an implantation doesn't occur, the lining of the womb starts to break down, and then ultimately a period comes. So there is a critical time then when the lining of the uterus has to be ready. It's called the window of receptivity. There's debate as to whether it's 36 hours or 72 hours, so either a day and a half or 3 days. Scientists still are debating that, because we can put an embryo in, we know what the optimum time is, and that's around the 6-day mark after ovulation. But so when we put an embryo back at what we think is the right time, the question arises, was the lining of the womb actually receptive at the time? So scientists have spent the last 20 years about whether the receptivity is there or not. And there are multiple tests have been developed where a sample of the lining of the womb is taken in a dummy cycle compared with ovulation. And then if the lining of the womb doesn't demonstrate the characteristics that it should on that one cycle, then perhaps we should wait another day, or maybe we should go a day earlier in putting an embryo back next cycle. There's a test called ERA, which costs you about $1,500 for the privilege. And they will say, they would give you an answer. And what they're looking at is the genetic makeup of the cells at that particular point in time. And based upon the expression of those genes, they say it's either good, it's the right time, or it's retarded, or it is advanced. And on the basis of that, the doctor may change the day of embryo transfer. That's the story. That particular assay was developed by a Spanish company who took it to market very early on the basis of what appeared to be some favourable results. However, that same company then embarked, as good scientists do, in a large randomised multi-centre controlled trial. That trial took place now 5 or 6 years ago, but the results, for reasons that I'm pretty sure I understand, i.e. commercial reasons, was published only 18 months ago. And what did it show? It showed no difference in pregnancy rates. So in my view, $1,500 is not worth spending. That's not the reason that implantation fails when you put an embryo back. They've moved on, that same group have now moved on to another test where they're looking at the bacteria in the uterus at the particular time of the cycle and trying to prove that what's called the microbiome at a particular moment, it needs to be a particular pattern to ensure that you get implantation. Again, well, so far, to my knowledge, there's never been a randomized controlled trial to prove whether it works or not. So, and the problem with all of these tests is that might be the case this cycle, but next cycle could be different. So, and that's probably why the randomized study for the ERA didn't ever prove anything, because there is individual variation from month to month. So, uterine receptivity, it potentially does cause problems. It was far back as 1950 that some scientists at Johns Hopkins demonstrated, looking at the pathology, the cells of the lining. They did find that there was variation in that window of receptivity in particular cycles. But when they looked at it in repeated cycles, it came and it went. And just as the ERA has shown that one cycle is different to every other cycle. Improving receptivity is what we try to do by giving large doses of progesterone in the luteal phase for frozen cycles and fresh cycles, in the hope that giving more and more progesterone might make that receptivity better or extend the window or something. And certainly without it, cycles don't do as well. So certainly fresh cycles, it's essential to have that luteal phase support with progesterone or something to stimulate progesterone production. In frozen cycles on a natural cycle, in young women, I don't bother, because the woman's own progesterone, as in a young woman, is likely to be adequate anyway. So over treatment, we probably are. Whether we're getting any more pregnancies because of it, people don't know really.
And don't forget that you can access all the previous episodes by going to our website www.theivfjourney.com and select IVF Journey podcast from the navigation menu.